Moving on from the martial arts, I know it's a great topic, but we're going to move on now. I'm now going to move into the sphere of writing, crafting stories of intricate words, and no, I'm not going to go there. That's a bit much even for me. Anyways, who is Mary Sue and why should you hate her? That's what the topic is today on this week's Knowledge Drop with me, Greg Laurel. So, Mary Sue. Some people probably already know what I'm on about and have already shuddered at the very mention of such a detestable name. Now, I don't actually know where the name comes from. There might be a literal character in a book of some regard literally named Mary Sue that this term comes from. Now, a Mary Sue is a perfect character. And I don't actually mean perfect for the story. I mean perfect as in has no character flaws, is too invincible to give a crap. The kind of character whose tragic flaw is that they're so great that people keep sacrificing themselves for them and they have to endure the loss of their friends because they keep dying in their name. Those characters you just want to punch right in their perfect chiseled face. And I mean, there's plenty of examples of Mary Sues throughout media. The best example would be the DC trinity of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. Those three are pretty big Mary Sues, especially Superman and Batman. Especially when you have those Batman fans that are like trying to explain why he can beat literally anybody ever. It kind of goes to show that's a Mary Sue, a character who's just too perfect for their world and just really has no right to be there because they're too good. They're an overpowered character. They're the character who's a literal god walking among mere mortals in some cases. You'll often find them in trashy fan fiction, and often in the form of self-inserts, where it's very obvious that the character that is a Mary Sue is a reflection of the writer in their ideal image of this ultimate being of true ultimate power. But Mary Sues should be avoided like the plague that they are, because it doesn't add to your story, it detracts from it. It's just no fun to root for a Mary Sue because you just know they're gonna win. It's like, I win because I do it. Like that kid on the playground who has that invulnerable shield that's invincible to literally everything. I'll admit that kid was kind of me. I'll admit I've had my share of Mary Sues. That's what, in my stories. That's where I got that tragic flaw from, because there was a short story I had to write for a middle school thing. And there was like, what's your character's tragic flaw? That was literally what I wrote down. Like, everybody keeps sacrificing themselves for them. So, I mean, I hope it goes to show how much I've grown as a writer, that I moved on from that crap. Your character can be powerful, sure. But if they're a Mary Sue, they're just no fun. Now then, like, it's your choice whether your character's a Mary Sue or not, but I assure you, I'm not going to enjoy your story. And I hope that very few people enjoy your story that is just a power fantasy of what you want to do to the universe. It's a slippery slope almost as to what defines a Mary Sue, whether you take this established character and call them a Mary Sue. There are characters that are generally agreed upon to be Mary Sues, like the DC Trinity. I don't see a lot of things that don't tell me they're overpowered as all buggery, but it's just, you've got these characters that you have to bend the rules of space and time just to get them to be vulnerable. And then of course inevitably you write yourself into a corner of having to come up with even more ridiculous things that will hurt them. I'll use my own characters again as an example. His skin became unbreakable, so they had to forge an entire crystal out of this cosmic power just to make him vulnerable. And then I later even made the mistake of writing him to have trained himself to be invincible to that, so that had to be something even more cosmic, reality bending, and by the end of the story you practically had to harness the power of the Big Bang just to get at him. And I looked back at that story and I tossed it in my fireplace and thank the gods I did, because I want to move on from that. But I mean, how do you catch yourself though? Because you might not initially think that you're writing a Mary Sue, because it's a lot harder to find flaws in your own work when you're writing them, especially. Because like as you're writing that work, it's what you want to put down, so therefore you think it's the right thing to put down. Maybe you let it age for a month, come back to it, or better yet, get someone else who knows what they're doing to look over it and be open to the idea that they're like, dude, this character's overpowered. I mean, what if you don't have that resource? What if you're like me and have no friends? A little deep. Usually I'll take the method of just aging it for a bit, leaving the story there and then letting it sit for a while, and then coming back to it like a day or even a week or even a month later with fresh eyes and be like, where did my instructor. I don't know what that was, but it made my eyes vomit. Well, that was a great line. But anyways, your Mary Sue is indestructible to anybody but yourself. And that's really it. Like, I know it's easy to get into these power fantasies of your self-insert character being just a god, and I know because I've done it, and I'm not proud of it, but I'm proud to have moved on from that. But like, even in some of my current work, sitting on my computer right now, like, some of those aren't too great as far as keeping the character in check, because it's like parenting almost, where you don't want to disparage your character because it's your character, it's your creation, kind of like how you don't want to disparage your child because that's your child. And it's almost the same basic principle. You gotta find the courage to find fault. I mean, if you do find yourself creating a Mary Sue, congratulations, you've done better than most. I mean, that in and of itself is pretty good to catch that, like, wait a minute, this guy's getting a little bit too powerful. And then you gotta tone it back. Maybe I am just casting a stone into a pond that will hopefully turn into a tidal wave. I mean, I'm certainly not gonna be the be-all end-all. There's been Mary Sues since literature began, and there's going to be Mary Sues until the end of time itself. I'm just here to tell you that Mary Sues suck. I mean, if you want a definite Mary Sue, like, the kind of textbook example was a fan character created called Cold Steel the Hedgehog. Just look it up, you'll figure it out, you'll be like, oh, that's what a Mary Sue is, and you'll look at the character, you'll be like, oh, that's cringeworthy. I mean, I'll look at some of my characters and be like, ugh, what was with that guy? And the only story that I ever actually got to novel length, the character was a zombie who had regained his memory after being quarantined for like 50 years in his friend's basement. The character eventually got so overpowered that the god of annihilation, as it was called, had to start slapping him around in order for him to face any sort of challenge, because otherwise he couldn't take damage. He wouldn't feel pain because all those nerves are dead. He would regenerate because he had the powers that be, and just all other enemies would quiver before him. And you do really end up writing yourself into a corner. You have to come up with these even more ridiculous enemies and more ridiculous circumstances that bend and break the rules of time and space itself just to get at that Mary Sue character that's just like, eh. So better thing to do would just to be create a character that isn't a Mary Sue. I mean, it sounds simple, but it's definitely easier said than done, that's for sure. One of the best things you can do to avoid Mary Sue is to, like, if your character is going to gain the powers that be, if your character is going to gain those, then you definitely want to have rules for those powers. You definitely want to have sort of a set guideline of what the limit is, because if there is no limit, then it's just gonna spiral on itself into the ridiculousness paradox. I don't think that's gonna be my official name for it, but I'll think of one sometime. But anyways, best way to avoid a Mary Sue is really just to keep them grounded in reality, and I know that's easier said than done. Everything I'm going to say here today is easier said than done. But if you really do take that literally, you really take the rules of reality as they are known and confine your character to that, and not like add the stuff. Like, if your story takes place on Earth with just your one average character who sure has some skills at whatever, who is qualified to do this job, who is qualified to stop this enemy, sure, but what's the best way to say this? If your character is, say, an expert at combat, then maybe try to put a damper on that by saying, like, he's great at hand-to-hand combat, but he's a terrible shot. Or he's a great sniper, but he's too reliant on his weapon. He's a master swordsman, but kick that sword out of his hands and he doesn't really know what to do. I mean, there's gotta be something. For a yin, there's a yang. For a plus, there's a minus. For a light, there's a dark. For a heads, there's a tails. There's gotta be that balance, or it's the spiraling infinity. There's really no better way to say it, I would say, but Mary Sues suck. They're not fun. They're boring. To keep them interesting, you have to do so much. You arguably have to put in more effort to keep that Mary Sue character interesting than you would have to put for just a regular character who didn't need all these reality-breaking things just to get under their skin. I'll take the character of the Doctor from Doctor Who. You might think he's a Mary Sue, but there are very clear weaknesses to him. I mean, like, he overcomes them, sure, but I would say the Doctor's not a Mary Sue in the true sense of the word. I mean, he has his moments, but he'd rather not use them. Like David Tennant, the Doctor, never carries the gun. Like he abhors violence and always wants to find the peaceful way. And that could be his tragic flaw. He's too peaceful. There's got to be something that can proverbially kick him in the balls and make it hurt. One of the more common things that keep a Mary Sue in check, that is almost tried and tired, is basically the Mary Sue's friend. If I can't get to you, I'll take out your friend and that will break you. And that's a start, but I personally wouldn't want that to be what can do my character in, just because it's been done so many times. Because it's a great safety net, sure, but it's an easy one. And if you want to challenge yourself, you gotta think of something else. If you don't want to challenge yourself, by all means, have them have a love interest or romantic relationship with somebody, and that becomes their weak link, because they have to now protect them. When they can't extend their power to them, they have to protect them. But that's kind of I would almost say that's kind of a cop-out, because it's a very easy solution to do. Just add a second character who is the damsel in distress, so to speak. And I would encourage something else, because that's just been done so many times. There's a million different ways that the story has been told, and likely infinite more that will be written. Personally, what I might do is make a very clear weakness of the character, like a very, not even just say a physical weakness, like they're a quintessential kryptonite, because there's got to be something that can cut them no matter what. But even then, that's just the kryptonite complex again. That's just saying, well, there's this, that, because, and no character is ever going to be perfect for a story. Like, there's always going to be something wrong with them. Like, if there's nothing wrong with them, they're a Mary Sue. I mean, that's the whole point. The whole point of a Mary Sue is that there's nothing wrong with them. And if the character is perfect for the story, then they kind of become a Mary Sue for the story in and of itself, and that's just some next level inception right there. But if you have your Mary Sue, you're adamant about keeping them in as a character, and you don't want them to get buttered, what do you do then? What do you do? How do you tone them down reasonably? And I get the feeling that's the corner that a lot of people have written themselves in, because especially with popular characters, more and more ridiculous things need to come forward just to be able to harm them. But if you tone them back, that goes against an established character, and there could be outcry from the fans that are like, no, this character is this, and these rules are here, but the rules have changed, and I don't like that, because I don't like change. I just want to keep my power fantasy. I want to keep my self-insert. I want to... But anyways, what would be your way to fix a Mary Sue, I wonder? I mean, you catch yourself writing in this character who is utterly ridiculous, but you're too far in to really change that. You're really too far in to change the character. So what do you change then? Do you change the outside circumstance, or do you knuckle down and change the character from start to finish? Both of them have their benefits and drawbacks, because on the one hand, if you change the character, you have to redo practically the entire story. But you might make a more convincing character, a more relatable character. But if you do pick up where you left off and just add outside circumstances that balance them out, on the one hand, that's nice, because you don't have to go back and change the entire fundamental story. But on the other hand, you run the risk of the infinite spiral. I've almost got a name for that. I'm not calling it the infinite spiral, because that would just be silly. That would almost be a Mary Sue. The Mary Sue paradox? No. But anyways, what would be your way to fix the Mary Sue that might be the DC Trinity, I wonder? Like I wonder if you think to yourself, like, how would I fix these established characters that are so ridiculously overpowered? Like, what would I do to fix that? And I ask myself that question a lot. Like, how would I fix them? Like, how would I tone them down to a relatable level? And then sometimes you might even ask yourself, do they need to be toned down for the relatable level? Is the point of this character to be an exemplar of perfection? Like, a Mary Sue may even have their place. Like again, the DC Trinity. They were created by power-tripping nerds at the time that wanted their power fantasy. And I get that, I really do. I've been on that power trip in my stories before. So what do you do then? Do you make that Mary Sue a side character, basically as a great equalizer, or is that worse? Because now you just have the quintessential solve button that is that character. A lot of times you have the ultimate weapon paradox, as I've called it, where you see, like, we got one option left. we do this thing that we didn't know we've had this whole time and we haven't used until now, and it wins the day. Why didn't we do that first? That's the ultimate weapon paradox. Why didn't we do that first? And therein lies the rub with Mary Sue's. They're the solve button that you don't want to press, but why don't you press it? Because that's what makes the most sense. Mary Sue's and sense don't necessarily go hand in hand. That's kind of what I'm trying to make. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make here. But what do you do to fix a Mary Sue? Do you just kill them off suddenly? That would probably be like a very slippery slope right there. Especially if you take like an established one and suddenly they die. It's just such a tricky thing. How do you fix a Mary Sue? Do you kill them? Do you rein them back? Do you go alongside them? I guess that really would depend on your story. Like, the context of the story may allow a Mary Sue to be humble in some regard, or knock down a few pegs, or what have you. Perhaps your story makes sense. Perhaps your story is about a Mary Sue who gets knocked down a few pegs and has to live with that. Ooh, that might be a writing prompt. Writing prompt. I'm gonna give you a writing prompt right now. How about that? Your character is invincible. Suddenly they are not, and they need to adjust to a vulnerable lifestyle. I challenge you to write that. I might do that myself. Anyways, the Mary Sue is a problem that's basically been a thing since time immemorial, and it's going to be a thing until time itself ends. Because everybody wants to be perfect, but perfection is just like, what a nightmare that would be. Nothing would be fun anymore. But even so, Mary Sue's absolute buggers. Don't do that. Thank you for watching this week's episode of Knowledge Talk with me, Greg Laurel. If you want to keep yourself updated on episodes and never miss one, do go ahead and click that subscribe button below. If you got suggestions, comments, or even questions for me regarding the show's topic, or just about me in general, go ahead and leave a comment. I'm probably watching. So until next week, may warrior and scholar come together and help each other to return home in great victory.